Going to play a little game with Augie of looking at Premier League clubs and, of course, the transfer window that's coming up, Augie, involving some pretty big names. Should Chelsea, who we'll be talking about right now, keep these players or move some of them on? Let's start off with Kepa Arrizabalaga, because we know that Chelsea seem to have been doing a lot better off without him, unfortunately. I don't think anybody can move Mendy from between the posts now, especially after the brilliant Champions League final. So what are your thoughts here?
Well, Edouard Mendy, I think, has been one of the signings of the season. He's been so understated, very reliable, and he doesn't really get the mention that he deserves when, people talk about the signings of the season. So here we go. I'm saying now that Edouard Mendy is one of the signings of the season. He's been a massive factor in Chelsea's Champions League success. But the flip side is that it's meant that Kepa has missed out virtually all season. I think, we saw that coming, I think, last season. Didn't have a great season under Frank Lampard. It was obviously going to replace him. But Chelsea have got a problem with Kepa because he was a world record fee for a goalkeeper, more than £70 million. He'll be on big money. But, how do you get that sort of keeper go when he's not been playing? He's not been playing enough to warrant a move. He's lost his place in the Spain squad for the Euro. So in many ways, Chelsea have got a player that they can't offload, but they're going to have to. I think from Kepa's perspective, he needs to play. He needs to get back in the team somewhere, play again, get his Spain place back and maybe move on. So it looks like the best only option is to loan him out, and you've got to find a club that will be willing to take on a percentage of his wages and hope that he can kind of rediscover the form that prompted Chelsea to buy him in the first place. So for that, I'd imagine that he would have to go back to Spain because his reputation in the Premier League suggests that, he's not done enough to convince a Premier League club that he can handle English football. So I'd imagine that if you can find a club on the continent that would take him on loan, that's the best option. But, Kepa's not going to stay and sit on the bench for another season. He's just not going to do his career any good by doing that.
Well, in a different case now, I mean, you said that Mendy probably is your signing of the season for Chelsea, but a lot of Chelsea fans also have praised, Thiago Silva for coming in and helping them, shape up that defense, which was an Achilles heel for them recently. What should Chelsea do with him? Because we know he is getting on in age. He made that record of being the oldest to enter into a Champions League final and now win it. So what do they do? Keep him or let him move on now that he's gotten a Champions League trophy again to add to his resume?
Well, Thiago signed a 12-month contract when he came from PSG last summer, and that expires in June. But I think Chelsea have got an option for the year, and I'd expect them to trigger that option because even if Thiago doesn't play, even if he plays 20 games next season, it's his experience around the club and his knowledge of the game. And Thomas Tuchel trusted him enough to start in the final of the Champions League against Man City before he was injured. So if he's starting Champions League finals, he's obviously got a part to play. So I think that Chelsea will keep him. I think they'll look to get another centre half and maybe a younger version of Thiago Silva, but for what he does, for what he brings to the club, I think it would be crazy for Chelsea to let him go because he's such an experienced player. So for me, they'll extend his contract by 12 months, try and get through another year, and then maybe sign a world-class centre-half that's a 10 years, younger version of Thiago Silva.
What about Christian Pulisic now? We have to go there because what Thomas Tuchel said it in the final right before for the Champions League, and he said, Christian does nothing wrong. He's just unfortunately the victim of him having to make a choice and having, some other good choices to come up against. But I'm not sure that Pulisic would want another year or 2 years of fighting for this place, even though when he feels he's doing everything right. So should he be moved on or should Chelsea hang on to him?
I think this is one that only Christian Pulisic can resolve it. I think Chelsea are happy for him to stay. He's a very useful squad player, as we've seen. He's a good substitute. He's an impact substitute. He's made a difference coming off the bench, certainly under Thomas Tuchel in recent months. And I don't see any reason why Chelsea would let him go. But like you say, does Pulisic want to stay on the bench for Chelsea another year? I think you look at what they've brought in. Obviously, Kai Havertz is going to play a lot more next season. He's really coming to his own. Timo Werner, you've got Mason Mount. They've got a lot of options. Hakim Ziyech as well. So Chelsea aren't short of options up front. So I think Pulisic is going to have to accept that if he stays at Chelsea, he's going to have a real battle on his hands to start in the team. So does he stay at the Champions of Europe and play the Champions League again next season, maybe having to accept that he's not going to play every week? Or does he think, I want to move on and play more regularly, maybe for a club that won't win the big prizes? It's a tough balancing act because you want to be winning the big prizes. He was delighted to win the Champions League. He's the first American to win the Champions League. I think that meant a big thing to him as well. So in his career, he has to think, do I stay at Chelsea? Do I go? He's only young. I think he's young enough to stick around at Chelsea for another year, give it another go. If this time next season it's the same scenario, maybe then he has to move on. But, it's not been a bad move to Chelsea. He's had a good success, I think, for 18 months there. He's done well. But he's going to have to accept that at his age and with so many rivals for his place, he's going to have to accept playing on the bench as much in the team.
And finally, one of those other options there up front, Timo Werner. Yes, he looks like he's enjoying his football a lot more under Thomas Tuchel. However, you still don't get the feeling that he's 100% settled. So keep or move on.
I think Chelsea keep Timo Werner, but I think next season's a big season for him because, you know, he came with a big reputation for a lot of money and he just didn't perform. And I think nobody could question Timo Werner's work rate. I think every time you see him play, he gives 100%. He works so hard for the team, chases defenders down, and that does play a part for Chelsea. You know, the work he does help the other players in the team, but he's been bought to score goals, and he doesn't score enough goals. And he, first of all, has to learn how to play the offside rule better because he's offside so often. I've been to so many games this season where he's had goals disallowed for being offside, maybe 10. You know, he's scored so many offside goals. If he can just tweak his game a little bit and time his runs a little bit, watch videos of Edinson Cavani because he's the master of timing his run, bending his run to stay on side. If Werner can learn to stay on side, those 10 goals that he's had disallowed could be 10 goals that he scores. And who knows what an impact they could have. So he has to learn the game better. He has to be smarter playing up front. But as we know, Chelsea want a centre forward. They want a guy that's like a modern day version of Didier Drogba, Diego Costa. They want Harry Kane. They want Erling Haaland. They might not get either, but if they get one, that's a bad news for Timo Werner. So he has to up his game quickly. Otherwise, you know, his time will be numbered next season.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.